Hey guys, welcome back. Let's talk about flow control statements in Python. So Python is a programming language, but what exactly is a programming language? In the most simplest of terms, programming language is nothing but a set of instructions that you pass to your computer to perform certain actions. Okay, now these set of instructions are generally stored in a file which we call as programs. The expectations from a program is not to run every single line of instructions one by one from the first line till the last line, but the program may need to be smart enough to know when to skip a certain piece of instruction, or when to run a set of instructions multiple times, or when to run one instruction over the other based on certain conditions. Now, these kind of changes in the flow of execution of the program can be done by using the flow control statements. So basically, your flow control statement can decide which Python instruction to execute based on which condition. Okay, so in Python, we have a few types of flow control statements. The if statement is the most commonly used one. We also have for loop and while loop. We'll talk about loops in the next video. In this video, we are only going to cover the if statement. So before we can talk about, or before we can start writing the if statement, you need to be aware of a few basic Python programming concepts like the Boolean data type, the Boolean operators, and the comparison operators. Okay, so now first let's look into these three concepts, understand them, and then let's get into writing the if statement. Let's talk about Boolean data type. In the previous videos, we have seen the most commonly used data type in Python, which are string, integer, and float. But Python also has a few other data types, and Boolean is one of them. Boolean is unlike any other data type in Python because in this particular data type only two values are allowed, which is true or false. And these values are case sensitive, meaning that you need to write them exactly like this. So your first letter is in uppercase followed by all the lowercase. So if I want to assign a variable with a value of Boolean, then I can just type a equal to true, and the variable a will then be of the type Boolean. I can check that by using type of a, which will return me class bool, meaning that the variable a is of the data type Boolean. Bool is nothing but an alias to your data type Boolean. So this is the Boolean data type in Python. It has two values, true and false, and that's all. Now let's look at comparison operators. So in the previous video, we have seen arithmetic operators, which included subtraction, multiplication, addition, etc. There are a few other operators as well in Python, and comparison operator is one of them. So as the name suggests, comparison operator is used to compare two values. So we have 6 different types of operators here. So we have the equal to symbol, we have equal to, we have not equal to, we have less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. The important thing from a comparison operator is that the expression that uses this comparison operator will always evaluate to a Boolean value. That is, when you execute an expression using these comparison operators to compare two values, the output will always be either true or false. So we can see some examples here. If we try to execute them using idle, so let's say, let me try to assign or define a variable x equal to 5. And now if I use a comparison operator like x double equal to 5, it will return me true. If there's an important thing that you should note here is that the single equal to symbol and the double equal to symbol are two different things in Python. So the first expression here, where I'm using a single equal to, is basically an assignment operator where I'm assigning the value 5 into my variable x. Whereas the second expression here, where I'm actually comparing x with 5, I'm using two equal to symbols. Here what's happening is Python is actually going to compare the value that is stored in this variable x with the value that I have presented here. In this case, x is having the value 5, and when it's comparing it with the value 5 here, it's going to return true. But let's say if I type x equal to 50, it's going to return false because x is 5 and it's not equal to 50. Hence, this is what your comparison operator does. So it compares two values, and these values can either be integers, strings, or float. So let's say if I have to compare, let's say hello with hi. it's going to return me, okay, I need to add another equal to symbol. And so now you can see that when I'm trying to compare hello double equal to hi, it's going to tell me false. But let's say if I type hello equal to hello, it's going to return me true. So this is how you can compare two strings, or you can also compare two floats. So let's say phi.1 equal to 3.0, it's going to return me false. I can also compare a float with the integer. So let's say phi.1 equal to 3, it's going to return false. So this is basically how I have used the equal to operator, equal to comparison operator, and you can see the output is always a Boolean value, either true or false. So we can also use other operators. So let's say 5 less than 3, it will return me false because 5 is actually not less than 3. Or let's say if I type 5 greater than 3, it will return me true because 5 is actually greater than 3. So this is how you can use different operators in Python, different comparison operators in Python and the expression which is using this comparison operator will always evaluate to either true or false. Boolean operators, also referred to as logical operators. There are three types of Boolean operators in Python. So we have AND, OR, and NOT. So basically, let's say you have a statement which has two different expressions and an operator. So in this case, let's say AND. The result of your statement depends on the result of each of the expressions. So let's say if both of these expressions will return true, then if you have an AND operator, then the whole statement will be termed as true. But let's say if any one of the expression in this statement will return false, then the whole statement will be termed as false. This is when you're using AND operator. But let's say if you're using OR operator, then the statement will return true if any one of the expression in that statement will return true. If both of the expression in your statement will return false, only then your OR operator is going to return the whole statement as false. So this is what an OR operator does. Okay, and then finally the NOT operator, it basically reverses whatever your expression results in. So let's say if your expression returns true, then using the NOT operator you can reverse the value from true to false and vice versa. So this is what your Boolean operators or logical operators in Python are meant to do. Let's look at some examples. I know this might be a little confusing in the beginning, but if you just practice it a little bit, you will get the hang of it. The important thing to note is the truth table that is mentioned here. I'll make sure to leave this in the description below or post it in my website so you can refer to this truth table as well. So basically, what this truth table is telling is when you're using your AND operator, if both your expressions are true, then the whole statement is true. If any one of your expression is false, in this case the second expression is false, in this case the first expression is false, and in this case both the expressions are false, then your whole statement will be termed as false. This is when you're using the AND operator. But let's say when you're using the OR operator, the OR operator will return the statement as true if any one of the expressions are true. Okay, but if both the expressions in your statement are false, only then your OR operator is going to return the whole statement as false. Okay, and finally the NOT operator, it doesn't need two expressions, it just needs one expression. So whatever the output of your expression is, it will reverse that value. So if your expression returns true, then the NOT operator will change from true to false. And if your expression returns false, then by using the NOT operator, you can change this false to true. This is what your Boolean operators are used for. For example, let me just copy this first example that I showed here and put it in idle. So now, let's say if I paste it here, it's going to return me true. It's going to return me true because both 5, basically what Python is going to do is first Python will check if 5 is greater than 3. It is greater than 3, hence it will return true here. And then it will check if 3 is equal to 3, which is also true. So true and true is true, as mentioned in this truth table. So true and true will return true. But let's say if I change this slightly from instead of 3, I'll make it 4. In this case, when I execute, it's going to return me false because the second expression is false. So it's basically truth and true and false, which as per the truth table, true and false will return false. Okay, so this is what your AND operator does. But let's say instead of AND, if I use OR operator here, then the whole statement will be termed as true, because for when you're using an OR operator, it just requires any one of the expressions to be true. In this case, the first expression holds true, hence the whole statement will be termed as true. So this is what your OR operator does. And finally, let's say if I use my NOT operator. So the same expression, when I execute it returns true, but for the same expression or for the same statement, if I just put a NOT before this whole statement, it will just reverse the sign, that is from true it will return false. So this is what your NOT operator does. I hope it's a little bit clear, but I'll leave this truth table and some examples in the description below or in my website, and I'll leave a link to that website in the description below. Now with all this basic understanding of what are Boolean operators, what are Boolean values, and what are comparison operators, I think we are pretty good to get started with writing if statements. Now let's talk about if statement. So if statement is the most commonly used flow control statement in Python. We generally use if statement to make sure to execute one piece of code over the other based on certain conditions. So the syntax of writing your if statement is, it should start with the if keyword, and then it should be followed by a condition or an expression. So whatever expression or condition that you use, it should evaluate to either true or false. Okay. And after that, the next thing that you need is a colon. This colon is required. This is like the Python syntax. Okay. And after that, you need to write the block of code that needs to be executed when this particular condition or expression becomes true. Okay. So now this piece of code, whatever you write here, it needs to be indented. Okay, that means there needs to be either 4 or 2 spaces. So because in Python we are not going to segregate block of code by using parentheses or any flower brackets, etc. The only way to segregate a piece of code is by doing the indentation. And we can do indentation either by leaving 2 spaces or 4 spaces. It's up to you. I think generally we use 4 spaces. So this is how even the piece of block of code is identified by the if statement. So let's say you have the if keyword followed by a condition or an expression. If this condition or expression holds true, then whatever you mentioned here in your block of code, I've mentioned 2 lines here. It can be any number of lines. It can be 1 line, 100 lines, or whatever, but it needs to be indented properly. So whatever is mentioned here will be executed, and then once this piece of code is executed, it will just come out of this if statement. So neither the else if nor the else part of your if statement will be executed. Okay, so this elif, what I mentioned here, is basically stands for else if. That means if you have a requirement that you want to check for multiple conditions. So if your condition number 1 is true, then you execute this piece of code. But let's say if your condition number 1 is false, then you want to check for another condition. So when you want to check for multiple conditions, that is when we use this code else if. So in this case, what happens is if your condition number 1 that you mentioned in your if statement is false, it returns false, then it will skip this block of code and then it will directly go into the else if part. So in the else if part, it will check for this particular condition. So whatever condition you have mentioned here or whatever expression that you have mentioned here, it will see if it evaluates to true. If it evaluates to true, then it will go ahead and execute the block of code that is under your else if part. But let's say if this condition becomes false, then it will skip this block of code and directly move into the else part. And as you can see, your else part does not have any condition. So basically you use else when, let's say, if all your conditions in your if clause, in your if keyword, and in your else if keyword fails, then whatever is mentioned under your else part will be executed. Okay, so I hope this is clear. So you have if, you check for your condition. If it is true, it will execute the block of code that you have mentioned inside your if keyword. But let's say if your if condition fails, then it moves into the else if condition, and if the else if condition is true, then it will execute the block of code under your else if condition. But let's say if your else if condition is also false, then it goes to the else part and it executes whatever is present inside your else part. Okay, so this is how your if statement works. Now we can also use multiple if statement within an if statement. So let's say something like a nested if. So let's say if I want to write another if condition here. So let's say if condition, then I can again say block, okay, block of code. Even this one works, and then I can write else another block of code. So even this one is valid in Python. So you have a if statement, you have a condition. If it holds true, it will execute this block of code, and then you have another if statement inside your if keyword. And this is a completely different if statement where you might be checking for a completely different condition, and then if this condition holds true, it will execute this piece of code and then come out of your whole if statement. But let's say if this particular condition is false, then it will skip this block of code, but then go to the else part, and whatever is mentioned in your else part, this block of code will be executed and then come out of your whole program. So this is what your if statement does. It will look for conditions that are specified in your if keyword or in your else if keyword, and whichever condition is successful, it will execute the block of code under that particular condition. Okay, and once a particular condition is successful, it will not check for any other conditions. So one if statement will only check for one condition, and if that condition holds true, it executes it. If that condition becomes false, then it goes to the next condition if available. If not available, it goes to the else part, and if else part is also not available, then it just comes out of the program, meaning that your else if and else are not mandatory, it's optional blocks. So your if statement can be written just using if. You don't really need to specify else if or else, even that one works. Okay, so I hope this was clear. Now let's look at some example. Let me comment this code here. So in Python, in order to comment multiple lines of code, we can use 3 single quotes. And if I have to comment one line of code, then I can just use a symbol hash. Okay. Now, what is a comment is basically what it will do is, if you have commented any line of code in your program, then Python will skip executing that particular line of code. Okay, so in this case, since I have commented from line number 1 to 14, Python will not even look into this when it's executing this program. It will straight away come to the next line, that is line number 15. So I've already written if condition here just as a sample. So what I'm going to do here is I've defined 2 variables. I have name and age. I have given the name as Robin and age as 10, and then I have my if statement. So what I'm doing in this if statement is I'm checking for a condition if name equal to Robin. So this one, as we saw previously, is nothing but an equal to comparison operator where Python is going to compare the value in this variable name with the value that is given here. If both of these values are same, then this expression will return true. And as I told you, if a condition will return true, then the piece of code below that particular condition will be executed. So if the name is Robin, if this is true, in this case it is, this piece of code will be executed. That is print hello Robin, print good to see you. And then it will directly come out of this if statement. It's not going to go to else if part or else part if this condition is true. Now let's execute this. Let me save this, and when I execute this, you can see here the output I'm getting is hello Robin, good to see you. It's because my name is Robin and my age is 10, and the only condition that I'm checking is if the name is Robin. In this case it is true, so it will execute this particular piece of code, that is the line number 22 and 23. Okay, now let's say I change the name from Robin to Robin Hood, and I save this program. I'll clear this, and now when I execute this, you can see that the output is this one, you are pretty young. It's basically printing what is there in line number 25. That means it has not executed these 2 lines. It's because I changed the name from Robin to Robin Hood, so this particular condition will fail. So this condition will evaluate to false. Since this condition evaluated to false, it will skip the execution of this block of code and directly move into the else if part. In the else if part, it's going to check for this particular condition, and the condition here is if age is less than 30. In this case, my age is 10, so this particular condition will be true. Hence the block of code under my else if will be executed, which is you are pretty young, and that is what is executed here. Okay. Now let's say if I change the age from 10 to 100. Okay, and now when I execute the program, you can see that the output that I'm getting is hello stranger, because my first condition in my if clause is it's checking if the name is Robin, which is not true because the name that I have given is Robin Hood. So this condition fails. So it now skips to the else if part. Inside the else if part, it's going to check if the age is less than 30, but I changed the age from 10 to 100. So now 100 is not less than 30. Hence this condition also fails. So it will not execute this part. Hence it will directly come into the else part, and in else part there is no condition. So whatever the block of code you have mentioned in your else part will be executed. In this case, I have just printed hello stranger, and that is what is getting inserted here, or that is what is getting printed here. So this is how your if statement works. I hope it was clear. Now let's see how we can use nested if statement. So let's say after inside my first if condition, I want to use another if statement. So let's say if age is less than 12. Okay, then I want to print like you are a kid. Okay, something like this. So what I'm trying to do is, if my age is less than 12, then I want to print you are a kid, and that's all. I don't want to use any else part or else if part. So as I told you, else if and else are optional. It's really not mandatory to have it. So in this case, now I'll change the age from 100 to 10, and I'll clear this output and I'll execute this. When I execute this, okay, my name is still Robin Hood. It's still not picking up this particular condition. It's still only picking up, only the second condition is getting passed. Hence it's printing the line number 27. Let me do another change. Let me change this from Robin Hood to Robin. And now let me execute this. When I execute this, you can see that it's printing hello Robin, good to see you, you are a kid. Meaning that the program went here to line number 21, the condition name equal to Robin was successful, it returned true, hence it will execute this block of code, that is hello Robin, good to see you, and it will also execute this block of code, which in this case is a if statement, where I'm checking if the age is less than 12, which is also true in this case because the age is 10, and hence it will print the block of code that is under this particular if statement, which is you are a kid, and that is what is getting printed here. Okay, so this is basically how your if statement works. We use comparison operators to see if an expression holds true or false, and then we can also use Boolean operators here to check for the result of an expression, and based on the condition, if it is true, then the block of code under that if statement will be executed. If the condition is false, then it goes to the else if part if available, or it goes to the else part if it is available. If neither else or else if is available, then the if statement will be basically the program will skip the else if statement and go to the next part of your code. So this is basically how your if statement works. I hope it was clear, and if you like this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you.